The broadcast began with a flicker, then stabilized into the familiar image of a Zaurak commander surrounded by a halo of shifting alien light. His elongated frame loomed across every stolen screen, his four eyes gleaming with theatrical cruelty. The resistance bunker, buried deep beneath Icelandic permafrost, hummed with tension as the commander replayed scenes of humanity's defeat, jets spiraling in fire, armored columns crumpling under gravity pulses, infantry scattering across burning snowfields. His voice, slick with contempt, narrated the fall of cities with the timing of a performer savoring applause. He claimed humans were warm-blooded, loud-minded primitives, and laughed as he displayed captured soldiers forced to kneel before towering Zaurak overseers. The bunker lights flickered under the strain of the hijacked transmission, but Lieutenant Rhea Morgan barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the footage of her own battalion dying outside Reykjavik. The memory hit like a hidden blade. She had dragged her sergeant across ice fracturing beneath bombardment, her hands numb, her mind trembling with grief and rage. She recognized most of the faces replayed on the screen. The commander mocked them with a grin. Commander Hale switched off the display before the next segment could begin. Silence settled like frost. Hale stood rigid, his breath visible in the frigid air. The bunker's heater was kept low to avoid detection, leaving the space cold enough for every exhale to resemble a ghost. Rhea could not tell if Hale's stiffness came from the temperature or from anger he no longer bothered masking. His lined face and slate-gray beard lent him an air of stubborn endurance. He had outlasted battles many assumed unwinnable. Now he guided a small cluster of survivors with the same unwavering precision. Private Jean, seated on an overturned supply crate, rubbed frostbitten hands together and muttered, "Every time they show that, they're rubbing salt in wounds we don't have the luxury to heal." His voice cracked from strain, but his eyes held a spark of determination that hadn't fully dimmed. Rhea stepped away from the now-dark display. "They want to keep us humiliated," she said. "Humiliated people don't organize." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The others listened. They always did. Her calm under fire was not bravado, but earned discipline. She had seen too much to waste breath on fury. Hale lifted a metal case from beneath the table, setting it beside the flickering lantern that provided the room's only warmth. A network of biometric locks glowed faintly against the steel. "Their arrogance is growing," he said. "That's when empires start making mistakes. And that's when plans like ours become possible." Rhea eyed the case. She had noticed Hale's disappearance 3 days prior and suspected it was connected to the rumors circling the resistance. Rumors of a classified initiative from the war's final days. "What did you find?" she asked. Hale opened the case. Cold air escaped, as if the contents themselves radiated winter. Inside lay a crystalline data core surrounded by protective padding. Blue light pulsed from its center like a heartbeat. Rhea felt several soldiers lean closer. "This," Hale said, "is the last compatible module from Project Hailstone. It holds data on a unit designed to operate in climates even the Zaurak can't risk entering." Jean frowned. "The ghost unit? The ones people talk about like legends." "Not legends," Hale said. "Operatives. Real ones. Created for extreme cold warfare. Trained to move through winter like it's an extension of their own bodies." Rhea studied Hale's expression. His eyes held a gravity she hadn't seen in months. "Are they alive?" "That's what we're going to find out," Hale said. He tapped the core. "This module contains their last coordinates. Their deployment zone is north of here, beyond the ridge. Remote enough that no Zaurak patrols stay long. Too cold for them. Too unpredictable." He hesitated, jaw tightening. "But perfect for the phantoms." The name sent a ripple of energy through the room. Even Rhea felt it. She had heard whispers in early training. Rumors of soldiers who could vanish into storms, who could lie in snowbanks unseen for days, who could use winter itself as cover. Stories she dismissed because they sounded like myths meant to inspire rookies. But now she wasn't so certain. "We leave at dawn," Hale continued. "If they're alive, even a handful of them could change the balance. If they're gone, we verify it and adjust. But we can't let this chance slip. The Zaurak think they've cataloged every strength we have. They're wrong. Rhea nodded slowly. If these operatives survive this long, they'll be cautious. We won't stroll into their camp and expect a welcome. No, Hale agreed. But they will recognize desperation, and they will understand it. Jean looked between them. What if they don't want to help? Rhea answered before Hale could. Then we convince them that humanity still has a pulse worth fighting for. The lanterns sputtered, casting brief shadows across the bunker walls. The cold deepened, settling into their bones, but for the first time in weeks the air felt charged with something other than dread. Possibility hovered between them like a fragile ember. Hale closed the metal case and locked it. Get your gear. No fires tonight. Rest while you can. Rhea tightened the straps on her pack, her mind already reaching toward the frozen valley where myths might still breathe. She didn't know what waited beyond the ridge, only that the world needed something sharp enough, cold enough, and relentless enough to face the Zaurak on their own terms. And if the winter phantoms existed, she intended to find them. The climb toward the northern valley began before sunrise, when the world was still slate-gray and brittle with cold. Rhea moved at the front of the small column, her breath thin and crystalline in the numbing air. Commander Hale followed close behind, checking the compass embedded in his wristband every few steps. Jean trudged silently at the rear, watching their tracks vanish almost immediately beneath drifting snow. The storm had not been forecast, but none of them complained. It concealed them better than any camouflage could. What worried Rhea was the growing tension in Hale's posture. He wasn't simply navigating terrain. He was searching for something he feared to find. They reached a ridge overlooking the valley just as the wind shifted, lifting the veil of snow for a brief, stunning moment. Below lay a stretch of frozen river and conifer stands half buried in white. But it wasn't the landscape that froze Rhea's breath. It was the shapes. 8 figures in shaggy, frost-dappled ghillie suits knelt in a semicircle beside a fallen log. They looked carved from winter itself, motionless, faceless, as though they had been waiting for centuries rather than minutes. Rifles rested in their hands with unnatural stillness. Jean whispered, "Are they human?" Hale raised a hand for silence. His eyes sharpened with recognition, but also something resembling fear. "They're hailstone operatives," he murmured. "Or what's left of them." Rhea studied the figures. Their suits were unlike anything she had seen. Woven fibers that caught the light like hoarfrost, patterns shifting subtly with the wind. They radiated a stillness, so complete it felt less like discipline and more like instinct. Yet none moved, even though they certainly knew they were being watched. That immobility unsettled her. Warriors could be calm, but this seemed beyond emotion, beyond humanity. She descended the ridge carefully, hands visible, making no sudden gestures. Hale and Jean followed. When they were only a few meters away, one of the figures finally stirred. It rose with a fluidity that contradicted its bulk and stepped forward. The face beneath the hood was veiled in charcoal paint, leaving only the faint outline of features. Twin eyes, dark and unblinking, assessed the newcomers with predatory precision. "You follow the beacon," the operative said, voice low and raw from disuse. Hale stepped forward. "Commander Hale, Earth Resistance. We believed you were dead." The operative tilted its head, a gesture that might have been amusement. "Death is relative in the cold." Rhea suppressed a shiver. "How many of you are active?" "We were 12, the operative replied. 8 remain." Hale inhaled sharply. "Your last coordinates were months old. How have you survived without supply lines?" "We adapted." The operative's answer was clipped, as if elaboration were unnecessary. But after a pause, perhaps recognizing their need for understanding, it continued. "The cold shields us. The snow feeds us. The mountains hide us. The Zaurak do not understand winter. That is our advantage." Rhea glanced at Hale, struck by how his confidence seemed to reassemble itself piece by piece in the presence of these spectral warriors. For months he had carried the burden of secrets. Now he stood straighter, as if finally approaching a purpose long deferred. "We need your help," he said. "The Zaurak are tightening their hold. Their new scanners can sweep entire valleys. They're targeting resistance enclaves. If we don't strike back soon, there won't be anyone left to defend." The operative's eyes narrowed. Striking back is not complicated. The question is whether you can withstand what follows. Jean stepped forward, voice steadier than Rhea expected. "We didn't come all this way to hide. We came because humanity needs you." For a moment, silence settled over the valley. Then the operative turned and motioned to the others. The remaining 7 rose with the same eerie synchronicity, forming a loose perimeter around the newcomers. Rhea felt their presence like a pressure in the air, silent, powerful, disciplined. "Walk with us," the lead operative said. "You must understand what we are before you can decide what to awaken." They moved deeper into the valley, weaving through drifts and frozen thickets. Rhea noticed how their steps left almost no imprint, how their bodies emitted no detectable warmth, even at close proximity. The suits were more than camouflage. They were concealment systems that manipulated temperature, light, and acoustics. But the operatives themselves were something else entirely. Their movements carried a predatory elegance, each gesture precise, each breath measured. Rhea wondered what training had shaped them, or what they had sacrificed to endure it. The path led to a natural hollow sheltered by overhanging rock. Within it lay a small cache of equipment marked with human military symbols, half buried in snow. The operative gestured toward it. "This is what remains of our mission. We were deployed to disrupt Zaurak staging lines in the Northern Hemisphere. We succeeded until the primary cities fell. After that, we became excess." Hale shook his head. "Not excess. Not anymore." The operative regarded him for a long moment, then crouched beside the cache, brushing snow from a rugged data pad. "We have gathered intelligence on Zaurak troop movements, energy grids, and supply weaknesses. They're fracturing their attention. Their arrogance blinds them to threats in terrain they despise. If we combine our resources, we can strike a critical blow." Rhea leaned closer. "What kind of blow?" "A dismantling of their command hub in this region," the operative replied. "The cold favors us. Their technology falters in extreme conditions. Their commanders refuse to enter deep winter zones. If we cut off their valley nexus, the surrounding sectors will collapse." Jean exhaled shakily. "That could free half the continent." Hale nodded. "Then we plan for it. Together." The operative studied them, as though weighing human resolve against the cold's indifference. "Finally," it said, "if you choose this path, there is no turning back. The cold will not show mercy." Rhea met the operative's dark gaze. "Neither will we." The operative stood, the faintest hint of approval in its posture. "Then prepare yourselves," it said. "Winter fights with us now." And for the first time since the invasion, Rhea felt the valley breathe, not with menace, but with possibility. The assault began under a sky the color of forged steel, a bitter dawn that offered no warmth and no mercy. Rhea crouched beside a jagged outcrop overlooking the valley nexus, her pulse steady despite the enormity of what they were attempting. Below, the Zaurak command hub pulsed with alien light, a cluster of obsidian towers radiating faint heat into the frozen air. Sentinel drones drifted in lazy orbits, scanning for signatures the winter phantoms had long ago learned to erase. Hale lay beside her, studying the terrain with the quiet intensity of a man who had waited too long for a moment that might cost him everything. Behind them, the 8 operatives blended into the snow so completely that Rhea felt as if she were sitting among spirits rather than soldiers. The lead operative, whom Rhea privately called Frost, moved into a low crouch. "We begin when the wind shifts," Frost murmured. "Their thermal veil dips during cross gusts. For 7 seconds, their sensors blur." Hale checked the wind meter strapped to his wrist. "The window's narrow." "It is enough," Frost replied, "for those willing to trust the cold." Rhea drew in a breath that stung her lungs. She had trained for harsh winters, had fought in snowfields and frozen wastelands, but nothing compared to the sensation of standing beside beings who moved as if winter itself had shaped their bones. She no longer questioned their humanity. She questioned the limitations she had once believed inevitable. The phantoms embodied discipline sharpened into something elemental. A sudden gust rolled across the mountains, carrying a dense plume of powdery snow. Frost rose. Now! They descended the ridge with swift, silent precision. Snow swallowed their footsteps before they fully formed. Rhea followed Frost's lead, mimicking the operatives' rhythm as best she could. Hale and Jean brought up the rear, their movements practiced but undeniably heavier than the phantoms. The valley floor stretched before them, open and deadly. Rhea felt exposure claw at her nerves, but Frost raised a hand, signaling that the sensor veil had already wavered. The phantoms surged forward, a coordinated ripple of motion almost invisible in the stormlight. They fanned out into two groups, weaving between boulders and wind-scoured ridges. Rhea pressed her body low, heart hammering as a drone drifted overhead. For an agonizing second it hovered, its scanners humming, then drifted away, confused by the flurries the phantoms had deliberately stirred. They had predicted even the drone's curiosity. As they neared the first tower, Jean pulled a small disruptor from his pack, fingers trembling. Hale steadied his hand. Slow breaths, he whispered, "You've got this." Jean nodded and crawled toward the tower's base. Rhea watched him anchor the device beneath a structural flange, its anti-resonance field beginning to pulse silently. When activated, it would sever the hub's communication with orbital command, isolating the entire sector. The second phase moved with brutal efficiency. Frost's team infiltrated the tower's perimeter, eliminating sentries with quick, precise shots that left no sound but the faint thump of bodies hitting snow. Rhea provided cover, her rifle sight cutting through the storm. Each squeeze of the trigger sent a controlled surge of focus through her, grounding her purpose. She watched Hale coordinate with the phantoms, his voice calm despite the shifting danger. For the first time since the invasion, he seemed unburdened, his leadership no longer dulled by despair. An explosion cracked across the valley, sharp and crystalline. Jin's disruptor had detonated earlier than expected. The shockwave rippled through the towers, dimming their lights in erratic pulses. Hale swore under his breath. "We need to move. Now." Alarms rose in discordant shrieks. Sentinel drones spun erratically, attempting to recalibrate. Zaurak soldiers poured from the central tower, their armor stiff and awkward in the cold. Frost signaled the phantoms forward. They moved like a collapsing avalanche, silent, unstoppable. Their rifles spat controlled bursts that dropped the aliens before they could orient. Rhea fired at a cluster attempting to flank Frost's position, her shot piercing the lead soldier's visor. The others faltered and used to fighting an enemy they couldn't track. The Zaurak commander emerged from the central spire, taller than the rest, adorned with ceremonial plating that glowed faintly beneath frost. His voice cut through the chaos, full of wounded arrogance. "You insignificant animals. You think the cold will save you." Frost stepped from concealment, snow spiraling off his suit. "The cold does not save," he said. "It judges." The commander lunged, but a phantom rifle cracked, sending him sprawling into the snow. Rhea reached him first, weapon raised. The alien stared up at her, for eyes wide with something she had not expected, fear. "You were not meant to endure this world," he rasped. Rhea leaned close. "You never understood our world." The phantoms planted charges around the nexus, their movements efficient even as the battle raged. Hale gathered the team, ushering them toward higher ground. "We're clear," Frost announced. The charges detonated with a muffled roar, fire erupting through the towers in shimmering columns. The structures collapsed inward, sending shockwaves that rumbled through the frozen earth. The drones fell from the sky, their signals severed. Zaurak forces fled in disarray, their command link obliterated. Rhea watched the destruction, breath trembling with a mixture of awe and relief. The tide had shifted. Not entirely, not permanently, but undeniably. Hale placed a hand on her shoulder. "This is the beginning." Frost approached, snow swirling around him like a mantle. "The Empire will retaliate. Hard. You must be ready." Rhea met his gaze, feeling the weight of what lay ahead, yet unafraid. "We will be." Frost nodded once, then turned toward the mountains where the phantoms already vanished into the storm. And as the wind swept across the shattered valley, Rhea felt, for the first time, that humanity no longer fought alone.